In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the front ball joints on this Ford F-350. This one is the upper, a smaller one, and the bigger one is going to be the lower one. We replace them at the same time. They come with all the hardware you need to install them. Let's get started. With the truck safely raised and supported, let's remove the wheel. Some wheels may have a center cap like this one, others might not. If yours does, all you need is a little pry bar or screwdriver to pop it out. It should have a cutout, so just look around to find it and pry it right off. That'll expose all 8 21mm lug nuts. So with a 21mm socket, remove them all. Now remove the wheel and set it aside. With the wheel turned in all the way, we have much better access to the two 21mm bolts mounting the caliper and bracket assembly onto the front knuckle. Let's remove both of these and remove the caliper off of the rotor. I'm actually going to leave this one threaded in just a few turns so I can hold the caliper and bracket while I remove the bottom one. Take this one out completely, set it aside, pull out the top bolt, and remove the caliper and bracket assembly with the pads and everything. A lot of times these rotors will seize on, so when you go to remove it, it's not going to want to come off. In that case, you could use a hammer, tap it, and then take it off. For me, it looks like it is not seized. I also did spray some rust penetrant right in between the lug studs and the holes on the rotor. Wiggle this and take it off. All right. Looking behind the fender liner, you'll see where the ABS sensor wire gets connected to the vehicle side harness. Let's pop this off of the frame so we can have better access at unhooking it. Use a trim tool and just slide it out. Well, sometimes it breaks, that's okay. Right up here is the lock that you have to press on to unlock the ABS sensor. Okay, there we go. Let's unclip it off of the front control arm. One more spot on the same control arm. Now use an 8mm socket and remove the two bolts holding these two little brackets onto the lower spring support. One more at the top of the knuckle. At the front of the knuckle, let's remove the outer tie rod stud from the knuckle so we can swing this back and forth freely and so that we can make more space for us to work. It does have a cotter pin that I'm going to have to remove. I'm using some cutters to straighten it out and hopefully pull it through. A lot of times these get stuck on here and we'll have to break it if that's the case. Well, mine's not budging, so I'm going to hammer a 21mm socket right over this and blast it off. With that removed, I'm going to put it back a few threads so that when we hammer the knuckle to break the tie rod stud free, it doesn't fall off completely, but rather gets held on by the nut. With that loosened up, remove the nut, pull the tie rod out. Let's get the locking hub off. Use a T27 socket to remove all three fasteners. There we go, pry it away and slide it out. Right in there, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a snap ring that holds the axle onto the hub. We have to get some snap ring pliers back there and make sure there's some heavy duty ones because these snap rings are pretty tough. Remove that and then slide the snap ring out so that we can unlock the axle from the hub. I wiped the grease out a little bit so I can keep my pliers clean and so I can see better what's happening in here. I have the pliers ready. Let's put them on the snap ring and remove it. My pliers slipped off, but I got the snap ring off. I'm going to use a magnet to fish it out the rest of the way. There it is. If you turn the knuckle on the backside, you'll see the 4 mounting nuts holding the wheel bearing and hub on. Now, right now you only see 2 because the other 2 are on the other side of the axle. So let's take these out. Once again, 21mm socket, and then we'll move to the other side. Now what you want to do is tap the wheel bearing side to side. I'm choosing to use a dead blow hammer so that I can be a little bit more gentle with it. But if needed, what you can do is put an air chisel on the back side where the mounting nuts were, so put them back on, and with an adapter that goes over the mounting nuts, chisel forward so that you can actually vibrate the wheel hub out of the knuckle, or just tap it. There it is. With the knuckle positioned straight, use a pry bar and pry the axle out of the differential. To get this axle out of the differential and out of the hub, you might need an assistant, although usually with just one pry bar you can pry it out and the whole thing should pop out. And now that it popped out, continue removing it and set it aside. At the top of the knuckle, we have a vacuum hose that goes to the locking hub. That's what actuates it. So gently pull this off, set it aside. Let's remove the upper ball joint now. We're gonna have to take the cotter pin off first. A lot of times it's easiest to use some side cutters. You can move the cotter pin around and then use the leverage of these to pull this out. I'm going to use a 34mm socket and remove the mounting nut. I can't get a power tool in here just because it's so close to the spring, so I'm going to use a breaker bar with a pipe on it for leverage. There we go. This right here is actually a little sleeve that should pop out. Now this one's quite rusted in there, and if it doesn't pop out, that's okay. Sometimes as soon as you release the mounting nut, they do loosen up. So just so you're aware, this is a two-piece setup here. It is normal for this to want to break free. To get the lower ball joint nut, you can either go through the knuckle or from the back side of it. I'm going to use that same 34mm socket, break this free. All right, with this mounting nut off, we're gonna make sure it fully comes off. Perfect, and we're gonna leave it on just a few threads. That way we can now separate the knuckle and the ball joints from the axle, and when this drops down, it won't fall to the ground. This will hold it, and then we can remove it. Use a large hammer and hammer right here and right here to break the ball joints free from the axle tube. There we go. Support the knuckle, remove that mounting nut, and drop the knuckle down and out. With the knuckle and ball joints out of here, we can take this sleeve and hammer it up. Because this helps set the alignment, you want to make sure that you remember in which direction it was. I remember that my cutout was facing towards the back. The axle tube actually has a little line there, so I can line it back up. But I like to do this so that I can clean everything and lubricate this with some anti-seize both here and here. That way this doesn't continue rusting. I know this is somewhat damaged over here. It's got a chip taken out of it, but that's okay. It's still going to do its job very well. And it still has most of the cutouts here that are needed for an alignment adjustment. Clean out this mounting hole where this sleeve goes. Then rinse it off with some brake parts cleaner. Once that's dried up, apply some anti-seize, that way it doesn't rust in the future. And then drop the sleeve back down in and make sure you hammer it down most of the way, but not all the way. With our knuckle on the table, let's start by removing any grease fittings that are here. So I have one on each ball joint. I'm going to take these out just so I can have a flat area to press up against. And then on this lower ball joint, there's a snap ring. We'll take that out as well. Use an 8mm wrench on this grease fitting. Most of them are going to be 8mm in size. Sometimes they're a 1/4 inch and other times they're 10, but like I said, most of the time it's 8. This one seems to be stuck, and careful with these because they can go flying. All right, now let's set up a ball joint press to press from down here towards the inside of the knuckle. We'll press this ball joint through. Here's my setup. The ball joint press is pressing on the bottom of the ball joint, and a receiving cup with an adapter are right on top so that the ball joint can go right into that. So let's put some pressure on it and take it out of the knuckle. Instead of finding a new cup, since this is now maxed out, I'm just going to take a hammer and tap it through the rest of the way until it pops out. Well, there's the lower ball joint. Similar situation up top. Let's remove the grease fitting. And this ball joint also gets pressed out from the bottom, so let's push it out the same way. Same setup, receiving cup, ball joint press, pressing right up against it. Here we go. There it is. Let's do a little bit of cleanup. I have a wire wheel and a drill here that I'm going to use to clean the mounting hole for both ball joints, as well as the ridge right up at the top where they sit. And then we'll continue with our installation. Let's take our upper ball joint. We're going to install this first because it's the last thing we removed. We have to remove the boot, and this applies to both ball joints actually, because we have to press on the outer ridge of the outer part of the ball joint basically. You don't want to press on the stud, and you definitely don't want to be pressing on the rubber boot. So all this means is we have to get a little screwdriver or anything that you have that'll get underneath the edge of the boot and just slowly and gently pry it up all around. Try not to bend it, because right here where it seats, there's a metal ring inside, and that's what helps it stay on there nice and tight. And if you bend that, it's not going to seat. So pull this up, and now we just have to find a cup that presses right on this ridge. I put a little bit of grease on the knuckle side as well as on the ball joint, not only to prevent corrosion, but also to allow it to slide in a lot easier. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to just very gently seat it. This way it'll stay in here, and I can let go of it and set up my ball joint press without it wanting to continuously fall off. Found a cup that fits on the outside, so I'm going to do that. We have this set up in here, so let's press it in. Make sure it goes smoothly and make sure it goes in straight. You don't want it to go at an angle. If it does, stop and try to readjust it. That's all the way in. I gave it some extra pressure, so let's remove the ball joint press. Perfect. This is what I want to see. This is fully pressed in. This ball joint shouldn't be flush. It should protrude just a little bit. And on this side, you can see how that upper ridge is seated up against the knuckle. Now take the boot, slide it over. All right, that boot is fully seated. I just ended up using a punch and a hammer and very gently tapping that through. I'm going to wipe this off, make sure you inspect everything. As long as you're gentle, the punch should not be piercing that boot. And now it's time to install the lower ball joint. Like I said, remove the boot on both, so it's time to remove the boot on this lower ball joint. Once again, same setup down here. Let's put some pressure on it, make sure it goes in smooth and straight. All right, that's bottomed out. Remove the tool. Add some extra grease if you want, and then put the boot on. Oh, this one slipped right over. That's perfect. Remember that this lower ball joint did have a snap ring on the bottom. There is a new one provided with the ball joint, so let's put that on. Keep a hand on it so it doesn't go flying while you put it on. All right. Make sure it's fully seated. Now take your knuckle and slide it back onto the vehicle. Have at least one of the mounting nuts handy. I have the nut for the lower ball joint in my hand, so I can just thread it on. Now I can let go and it won't fall off. Let's snug both of these up, and there's actually a sequence to correctly tightening these. So we're going to tighten the lower one first to 44 foot-pounds, then 69 foot-pounds on the top, and then 150 on the bottom again after you tighten the top one. This new mounting nut is a 32 millimeter, so put a socket on it and bottom it out. The whole stud on my ball joint is spinning, so what I will do, because I'm on a lift, I'm using a pull jack, but if you're on the ground, just use your floor jack with a piece of wood or something soft in between. Jack this up so you can basically jam the stud into the axle, and that will stop it from spinning. Put a little bit of pressure on it, and start tightening again. All right, that just bottomed out. Snug it. Let's give it 44 foot-pounds. A lot of half-inch torque wrenches start at 50 foot-pounds, so if yours does, just do 50. That's totally fine. It's close enough. All right, that was 44 right there. At this point, I'm going to remove the pressure that I put on this. It's not going to move again, so remove your support. Now we have to put the upper ball joint nut on and tighten this to 69 foot-pounds. This is also a 32 millimeter now. That's it right there. This being a cotter pin style nut, we have to continue tightening to get the slots to line up. I know mine is torqued, and getting my socket back on, well, it's not that easy because it interferes with the spring. So if you have a shallow 32, that might work out better. I'm actually just gonna use a pipe wrench and tighten this the rest of the way so I don't have to get my socket stuck back on there. All right, my slot lines up right there. So put your cotter pin through, and as always, we're gonna bend it over to lock it in. There we go. Just a tip, if you leave a little bit of wiggle room on it, it's less likely to seize up. And back down to the lower ball joint, torque this to 150 foot-pounds, which is going to be the final torque for this nut. All right, no cotter pin on this one, it's a locking nut. At this point, we'd want to clean inside of here where the axle and the wheel bearing go. For me, it's actually in really good shape. It's very clean, so I don't really have anything to clean up other than to just wipe it off with a rag, just so I can make sure there's no debris. Usually there is a little bit of rust right on either edges, so on the outside and on the inside. You can take a wire brush, a wire wheel, a little bit of fine sandpaper and clean that off. Once again, nothing to clean here for me. Even on the outside, my knuckle looks really good. Usually you would want to sand it nice and flat so that the wheel bearing can seat properly. What I will do is I'm going to put a little bit of silicone paste right on this inner ridge. This is where the seal that goes around the axle sits, and this will help it to slide in a lot better and seal up a lot better. Take your axle, gently, carefully slide it through. This is the seal that I was talking about. I put a little bit of silicone paste on that as well. Drive it in the rest of the way. All right, time to get a rubber mallet and tap it in. Once you know the splines are seated, but it feels like it doesn't go in any further, what you want to do is take a large punch and very gently tap this seal in further so that it doesn't keep bouncing off of the seal as you try to push the axle the rest of the way in. Optionally, if you don't have a large punch that isn't going to damage this, use an extension. In my case, I'm using a 3/8 drive extension, and tap it in the rest of the way. This is going to be a lot flatter than any large punch that I have and is less likely to damage it. That's fully seated. So next I want to coat this in some anti-seize. That way it doesn't corrode in the future. And I'm going to put a little bit of silicone paste right in here so that the O-ring that sits around the wheel hub can also slide in and seal up. If all you have is regular grease, you can use that. That's totally fine, as long as this is coated to prevent corrosion. Let's apply some anti-seize to the outer surface of this knuckle where we cleaned up. We don't want any rust building up here, so just keep it a nice thin layer and coat it all with anti-seize. Typically, this is when you would put on a backing shield as well. My truck does not have this anymore, so I'm going to take the wheel bearing and slide it right in. With the ABS wire out of the way, you can help it along with a rubber mallet just to fully seat it. As long as that O-ring goes over the lip and into its groove, perfectly fine. Now let's go on the back side and start on the mounting hardware. With these started on, let's snug them up. Now that they're all started and snugged, the torque for these is 133 foot-pounds. We're gonna go in a cross pattern to make sure everything is fully seated as it should be. Once again, 133 foot-pounds. Double check them if you want. I know all of mine are tight, so I'm going to move on. It's time to install that snap ring that locks the axle onto the hub. So get your snap ring on the pliers and put it right on where it belongs. I'm going to use the help of a screwdriver to push it in all the way as I expand it. Otherwise it's refusing to seat. There we go. Sometimes it's quite difficult, honestly. I put a lot of force into that one. Now this is actually not fully seated. I'm going to take that same screwdriver and poke it in so that it actually locks in. And the other side looks like it did actually seat. You should be able to spin it around like this without it popping out. All right, that looks seated to me. So we are good to go. While I'm here, I'm going to grease up the axle splines a little bit, as well as the splines on the hub, just so that when the locking hub goes in, it can slide in easily and mesh with all the splines. You really don't need a lot on here. You just need enough to coat things so that, like I said, things can mesh properly. I'm going to coat the outside here as well. There's an O-ring on the locking hub that's going to slide on. I'm going to wipe off this outer area where the bolts go. There's supposed to be a gasket. It is currently stuck to the locking hub, which is fine. It didn't tear. If it tore, I would have wanted to replace this. Optionally, in a pinch, you could use some RTV, but a gasket is preferred. So slide this locking hub in. There's that O-ring that needs to seal up. You're gonna have to most likely spin this a little bit so you can get all the splines lined up. Okay, there we go. Spin the axle. Okay, there we go. Now it's got a couple pins. Line this up. Press it all the way through. If while you're trying to put this in, it just doesn't seem like it wants to slide in all the way, but you feel that it did engage with all of the splines, what you can do is you can lock it and then push it in while moving this around. Eventually, it should slide right in, and the fact that it's locked means that it's actually going to want to spin everything at the same time so it can stay meshed together. Then you can unlock it, drive it in the rest of the way, and let's put in the bolts. Get that T27 socket on. These are very small, so once you bottom them out, snug them at most 1/8 of a turn. That's it. Reconnect the vacuum line for the locking hub. Make sure that's pressed in all the way. Let's resecure our ABS wire first on the knuckle. Snug this up, and keep in mind it's a very small bolt, so don't tighten it up too much. Loop it around the shock absorber, and 2 bolts hold it on the differential right by the spring. Make sure the retainer is positioned flat and tighten these up. Just give them a little bit extra, and that's good. It is normal for these to want to move around here. A retainer on this control arm. Over here, you're going to have to reuse the old retainer that came off of the old wire. So clip the new wire back into it and secure it. Now take the electrical connector and plug it in to the vehicle side harness. Make sure that clicks and lock it onto the frame. Let's get the tie rod stud back through the knuckle. Snug it up, and then the torque for this is 85 foot-pounds. That's 85, but this being a castle nut, you have to continue tightening to line up the cotter pin slot. You never want to loosen these, even if it's close. For me, it actually would take just a little bit extra to get it to line up with the next slot, so I'm going to do just that. That right there is spot on. I'm going to put a new cotter pin in. Even if your old one is in good condition, you always want to install a new one. Stick it through, and we're going to bend it over to lock it in. Apply some anti-seize to the surface so that it doesn't corrode in the future, and try to avoid getting it on the lug studs. If you get it on a little bit, that's okay, you can wipe it off. Now take your rotor and slide it over the hub. Push it on all the way. To ensure that it stays securely mounted on here, I'm going to use 2 lug nuts and bottom them out up against the rotor so that it doesn't move around. Now take your caliper bracket assembly, slide it back over the knuckle. Have at least one mounting bolt ready so that as soon as you line it up, you can thread it on and it'll hold it on for you so you can install the other one. With both started, snug them up. The torque on both of these is 166 foot-pounds. Let's get the wheel on. Install all 8 lug nuts. We'll bottom them out in a cross pattern to seat the wheel evenly, and then also in a cross pattern, we'll torque them to 165 foot-pounds. Once again, 165 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Here we go. Double check them if you want. I'm sure that mine are tight. So now, because I had this cover, I'm going to put this back on, line it up, if yours had it, with the lug nuts, and then tap it on. There you have it. Take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.